Alright everyone, welcome back to another USIS Axiom video. Today we are going to talk about something very important in AP Psychology Unit 1. Biological bases of behavior, specifically chromosomal abnormalities. These are genetic conditions caused by extra or missing chromosomes, and they can influence both physical development and cognitive development. We will cover 5 major conditions: Turner syndrome, Klinefelter syndrome, Down syndrome, Tay-Sachs disease, PKU, phenylketonuria. Let's break them down one by one. First, let's talk about Turner syndrome. Turner syndrome occurs only in females. Normally, females have 2 X chromosomes, XX. But individuals with Turner syndrome have only 1 X chromosome. So their chromosome pattern is XO. In other words, they are missing 1 sex chromosome. Now what does this cause? People with Turner syndrome often experience failure to develop secondary sex characteristics during puberty, infertility, a webbed neck, underdeveloped ovaries. So biologically, the reproductive system does not fully develop. But here is something very important for AP psychology. Most individuals with Turner syndrome have normal intelligence. However, they may struggle with visual spatial tasks, like reading maps, geometry, spatial reasoning. So the key point is, Turner syndrome affects physical development, but intelligence is usually normal. Next, let's look at Klinefelter syndrome. This condition occurs only in males. Normally, males have XY, but individuals with Klinefelter syndrome have XE. That means they have an extra X chromosome. Now what are the effects? Some common traits include reduced testosterone levels, delayed or incomplete development of secondary sex characteristics, small testes, infertility. Another characteristic is that some individuals develop breast tissue, a condition called gynecomastia. Now from a psychological perspective, most individuals with Klinefelter syndrome have normal intelligence. However, they may experience language development delays, reading difficulties, mild learning disabilities. So again, the key takeaway: Klinefelter syndrome does not usually cause intellectual disability, but it may involve learning difficulties. Now let's move to one of the most well-known chromosomal conditions, Down syndrome. Down syndrome occurs when a person has 3 copies of chromosome 21. This is called trisomy 21. Normally we have 2 copies of each chromosome, but individuals with Down syndrome have 3 copies of chromosome 21. This extra genetic material affects both physical and cognitive development. Common physical characteristics include a round face, a flat nasal bridge, almond-shaped eyes, shorter stature. But the most important psychological feature is that individuals with Down syndrome typically have intellectual disability. This means cognitive development occurs more slowly. However, many individuals with Down syndrome can still develop strong social skills, emotional warmth, meaningful relationships. So remember this key exam point: Turner syndrome and Klinefelter syndrome usually have normal intelligence, but Down syndrome often involves intellectual disability. Next we have Tay-Sachs disease. This condition is very different from the others. Tay-Sachs is a genetic disorder that destroys nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord. It is caused by a mutation that prevents the body from breaking down certain fatty substances in nerve cells. Because these substances build up, they become toxic to neurons. The result is progressive loss of nervous system function. Symptoms usually begin in infancy. At first, the baby may appear normal. But over time, motor skills decline, vision and hearing deteriorate, paralysis develops. Unfortunately, Tay-Sachs disease is fatal in early childhood. Finally, let's talk about PKU. PKU stands for phenylketonuria. This condition occurs when the body cannot properly process an amino acid called phenylalanine. Normally, phenylalanine is broken down by enzymes. But in people with PKU, the enzyme needed to process it does not work properly. As a result, phenylalanine builds up in the body. When levels become too high, it becomes toxic to the brain. If untreated, PKU can cause irreversible brain damage and intellectual disability. However, there is good news. PKU can be controlled with a special diet low in phenylalanine. That's why newborn babies are usually tested for PKU shortly after birth. Early detection allows doctors to prevent brain damage. Let's quickly review the key ideas. Turner syndrome, right-pointing arrow, female with 1 X chromosome, XO. Klinefelter syndrome, right-pointing arrow, male with extra X chromosome, XXY. Down syndrome, right-pointing arrow, 3 copies of chromosome 21. Tay-Sachs, right-pointing arrow, progressive degeneration of the nervous system. PKU, right-pointing arrow, cannot process phenylalanine, causing toxic buildup. Alright, That's it for today's lesson on chromosomal abnormalities in AP psychology. If this helped you understand the topic, make sure to review these conditions because they often appear on AP exam multiple choice questions. In the next video, we'll continue exploring the biological bases of behavior and how genetics interacts with environment to shape human development. See you in the next lesson.